Imagine a country where millions of people have quietly stopped paying their bills. Rent, credit cards, student loans, utilities, people are just letting them slide. And it's not because they're careless or lazy. They've reached a breaking point. Over 50 million Americans are behind on payments right now, not by accident, but by choice. They've realized that doing everything right doesn't get them anywhere. Paying on time doesn't put food on the table. It doesn't prevent the fridge from being empty. It doesn't save them from financial anxiety that never ends. The truth is, living paycheck to paycheck is now the norm. According to recent surveys, more than 60% of Americans barely make it from one pay period to the next. Even those earning six figures are caught in the same trap. And when the math stops adding up, people stop playing by the rules. It's not rebellion for fun, it's survival. Credit card delinquencies are skyrocketing, auto loans are falling behind, and millions are missing student loan payments. This isn't just a financial problem, it's a social phenomenon. People are discovering that fear of debt only works when you actually have something to lose. If your bills force you to choose between eating or paying off a card, fear loses its power. And once fear disappears, a strange shift happens. Suddenly, the system bends toward the individual. Settlement offers appear, balances get reduced, and collection calls sound almost polite because creditors know they're losing control. For many, this is a calculated strategy. Every paycheck becomes a decision: food or phone bill, rent or electricity, survival or obedience. People are learning which bills are dangerous and which ones are mostly harmless. Student loans? You won't go to jail. Credit cards? They'll send letters, maybe call, but repossession is unlikely. Medical bills? Under $500, they often don't even hit your credit report anymore. People are navigating a system built on fear and obedience, and they've figured out the loopholes. What's ironic is that paying bills on time is now riskier than skipping them. People have watched their credit scores drop after paying off loans, simply because the account's closed. Obedience no longer guarantees security, it rewards the system, not the individual. And this is causing a quiet revolution. People are prioritizing what matters. Rent, utilities, and basic necessities come first. The rest? They're negotiable, optional, or postponed. This is not irresponsibility. It's strategic survival. Debt collectors are struggling. Call centers are filled with agents trying to reach people who simply don't answer. The response rate has dropped dramatically, with entire accounts going unanswered. The new scoring models, like FICO 9 and VantageScore 4, sometimes ignore old collections entirely or reduce the impact of medical debt. So people are paying less attention, but credit scores may actually improve in some cases. It's counterintuitive, but it's real. The system that was meant to control behavior is failing because people no longer believe in it. Americans are discovering that defaulting can sometimes be more beneficial than obeying. The infrastructure isn't ready to chase millions of defaulters, and legal enforcement is slow and ineffective. Wage garnishments are hard to enforce when people change jobs frequently or work in the gig economy. Even bankruptcy, once seen as a last resort, is becoming a strategic tool. Middle-class families with stable jobs are using it to reset and survive rather than hit rock bottom. And this isn't isolated. Communities, online forums, and social media are full of people sharing tips, tricks, and success stories. The idea of walking away from debt is no longer taboo, it's practical. The first part of this movement is subtle, but it's growing. People aren't shouting in the streets, they're quietly reclaiming control over their lives. They are deciding what deserves to be paid and what doesn't. They've realized the credit system, once revered as sacred, is now broken. Banks and lenders are panicking because disciplined, previously reliable payers are disengaging. The old model relied on fear, but fear only works when stability exists. When stability is gone, people make choices based on survival, not morality. And when millions do this simultaneously, the system begins to crack. This isn't chaos, it's adaptation. People aren't broke because they're irresponsible, they're broke because the system doesn't reward obedience anymore. Rents have risen dramatically, grocery bills are up, childcare costs have exploded. Wages barely move, and when the cost of living outpaces the ability to pay, behavior changes. Paying bills is no longer an act of virtue. It's a choice, and for many, survival comes first. As the first wave of Americans quietly opt out of traditional bill payments, the scale of the movement becomes staggering. Millions are intentionally skipping payments, not out of laziness, but as a calculated response to economic reality. Surveys reveal that over 70% of households now intentionally delay at least one bill per month. Credit cards, student loans, and medical bills top the list. These aren't accidental mistakes, they are informed decisions. People have learned which obligations will cause immediate consequences and which won't. And this understanding is changing behavior nationwide. This shift isn't just financial, it's cultural. A quiet rebellion has emerged. People are no longer adhering to the old rules of money. The idea that one must pay everything on time to maintain financial virtue has become obsolete. Now, paying bills is often a luxury, something only those with excess funds can afford to do consistently. For the rest, prioritization is key. Rent, groceries, transportation, and utilities take precedence. Everything else is optional. Credit card companies, collection agencies, and even student loan servicers face a growing reality. Ignoring them may not just be safe, it may be the most rational choice. Consider this. Student loans, once treated as sacred debt, are now being strategically ignored by millions. Borrowers are enrolling in deferment programs, hardship plans, or simply skipping payments entirely. And while traditional thinking equated default with failure, today, default can be a rational, financially intelligent decision. Many individuals are discovering that their credit scores can even improve under new scoring models despite ignoring certain debts. This is counterintuitive, but it's happening. Debt collectors aren't keeping up. The sheer volume of defaults overwhelms traditional enforcement mechanisms, and legal action is often slow, inefficient, or impossible to pursue. Bankruptcy, long feared as a last resort, is being reframed as a tool for middle-class strategy. People with steady incomes, reasonable assets, and otherwise solid financial histories are using Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 filings to reset their finances before they collapse under the weight of obligations. For decades, bankruptcy was stigmatized. Today, it's tactical. Corporations have always used bankruptcy to restructure and survive. Now individuals are adopting the same mindset. When the system doesn't serve you, it's time to walk away on your own terms. The psychological implications are profound. People are realizing that fear of collections, penalties, or credit score drops only works when survival isn't on the line. When faced with rent that's overdue, a grocery budget that's insufficient, and utilities at risk of disconnection, the morality of paying every debt on time loses all power. Survival instincts take precedence. This practical approach is spreading fast. Social media, forums, and TikTok are filled with tutorials on how to navigate this new landscape. People openly share which bills to prioritize, how to negotiate, and how to manage creditors strategically. What was once private shame has become public strategy. And here's the kicker. Many Americans are thriving more financially by disengaging than by adhering blindly to the old system. Ignoring certain bills allows them to allocate resources where it truly matters, ensuring survival and even modest growth. Banks, creditors, and loan companies are struggling to keep pace. They attempt legal action, wage garnishment, and collection letters, but it's increasingly ineffective. Workers move jobs frequently, gig economies complicate enforcement, and the sheer scale of defaults overwhelms the system. The financial infrastructure was designed for compliance, not resistance. Now it's being tested in ways that were previously unimaginable. Credit scores, long revered as the ultimate measure of responsibility, are losing their significance. High scores no longer guarantee access to housing, loans, or opportunities. Interest rates have risen, down payments have become prohibitive, and economic instability makes past credit behavior largely irrelevant. People are waking up to this reality. A 740 credit score means very little if the paycheck doesn't cover rent. The obedience equals reward model is broken. Cash flow, prioritization, and survival tactics matter far more than historical scores. The consequences are far-reaching. Lenders are tightening standards, not because borrowers are reckless, but because the predictable model of credit compliance is breaking down. Defaults are occurring among the responsible demographic middle class, educated and previously credit-reliable individuals. This is not isolated to the financially struggling. Even prime borrowers are intentionally opting out of the system, choosing survival over perceived morality. It's a systemic challenge. The more people disengage, the more traditional enforcement mechanisms fail, and the harder it becomes to maintain the old financial order. Healthcare debt illustrates this perfectly. Recent regulations mean small, unpaid medical bills may no longer impact credit scores at all. As a result, patients strategically pay only what is urgent or life-threatening. Utilities and rent take precedence. Optional debts, such as some loans or non-critical medical payments, are deferred or ignored entirely. This is no longer about irresponsibility, it's about managing scarce resources effectively. Millions have quietly adopted this behavior, making the old rules of financial obligation increasingly irrelevant. The psychological fatigue of modern life amplifies this trend. Years of inflation, crises, emergencies, and stagnant wages have exhausted the population. Chronic financial stress is now a widespread reality, with psychological markers akin to trauma. In this context, long-term penalties lose power. Immediate survival becomes paramount. People are skipping payments without shame because the immediate benefits, keeping food on the table, electricity running, and rent paid far outweigh abstract future penalties. Priorities shift, and with this shift, the system begins to falter. This is the essence of the quiet rebellion. Americans are not merely refusing to pay, they are learning, adapting, and optimizing. They understand which debts truly bite and which can be ignored without catastrophic consequences. Social reinforcement ensures the behavior spreads. When neighbors, co-workers, and online communities share success stories of surviving and even improving financially after skipping certain payments, the taboo disappears. Non-payment becomes normalized, rationalized, and widely accepted. In short, the system's control depends on belief. Belief in the consequences, belief in enforcement, belief in the fairness of the rules. Once that belief erodes, compliance evaporates. Millions of Americans have reached this point. The system is no longer functioning as intended. Obedience is optional. Bills are selectively paid. Survival comes first. And this is happening quietly, strategically, and on a scale that is beginning to alarm policymakers, creditors, and financial institutions alike. As this financial rebellion grows, the consequences are rippling far beyond individual households. Entire sectors of the economy are starting to feel the pressure. Banks, credit card companies, and loan servicers are facing an unprecedented challenge. Their traditional enforcement strategies no longer work on a mass scale. When millions of consumers strategically ignore debts, the predictable cash flows that the financial system relies on begin to falter. This isn't a temporary glitch, it's a structural shift. Collections that once seemed routine now become complicated, expensive, and inefficient. Legal systems struggle to keep up, and wage garnishments are limited by modern job mobility and gig economy realities. The old methods of control, based on fear and punishment, are failing. One of the most striking aspects of this movement is how strategic it has become. Consumers aren't simply refusing to pay randomly, they're making careful, informed choices about which bills to prioritize. Rent and utilities usually top the list. Credit card minimums, student loans, and discretionary medical bills are deferred. People are effectively playing a high-stakes game of financial triage, where each dollar is allocated to maximize survival. And as they share their strategies online, through forums, social media, and TikTok videos, these tactics spread rapidly. What was once considered private shame is now openly discussed as clever financial management. Entire communities have formed to educate and support each other in navigating this new normal. Banks are responding, but often in ways that reveal just how unprepared they are. Some have introduced stricter lending requirements, hoping to prevent further defaults. Others attempt to negotiate settlements with individual borrowers, only to find that scale and legal limitations make such efforts almost impossible to enforce universally. The system was built for compliance, but now it faces mass, informed disengagement. Traditional credit reporting models, long thought to be the backbone of financial responsibility, are starting to lose relevance. New scoring models like FICO 9 and VantageScore 4 are reshaping the rules, sometimes even rewarding strategic non-payment. The very metrics that were supposed to keep people in line are now failing, and borrowers are beginning to realize it. Student loans are a prime example of this shift. Once considered untouchable obligations, millions of borrowers are now taking advantage of deferments, hardship plans, or outright non-payment. Defaulting, once a mark of shame, has become a rational, calculated move. Some borrowers have even seen improvements in their credit scores despite ignoring certain debts, thanks to changes in scoring rules that discount old or settled accounts. The traditional threat of punitive action has lost its teeth. Meanwhile, bankruptcy, historically treated as a last resort, has become a tactical tool for middle-class Americans. By strategically filing for Chapter 7 or Chapter 13, individuals are able to reset their finances, escape insurmountable debt, and re-enter the system on more stable footing. In many ways, personal finance is beginning to mimic corporate strategy: restructure, reset, and survive. The psychological impact of these trends cannot be overstated. Chronic financial stress, stemming from stagnant wages, rising inflation, and mounting living costs, has left millions exhausted and desperate. In this context, abstract penalties like credit score drops or collection notices have little influence. Immediate needs, food, shelter, utilities, take precedence over long-term consequences. Survival becomes the primary motivator, and morality or social expectation takes a back seat. This shift in priorities is further reinforced by seeing others succeed under the same strategies. When neighbors, colleagues, and online communities openly share stories of thriving after selective non-payment, the stigma fades. Non-payment is normalized, rationalized, and even celebrated as intelligent financial decision-making. The cultural implications are profound. For generations, Americans were conditioned to believe that paying every bill on time was a moral imperative. Obedience to the financial system was equated with virtue, and failure to comply was stigmatized. Today, that narrative is crumbling. The social contract that underpins credit and debt is being rewritten in real time. Compliance is no longer automatic, it's optional. Millions are walking away from obligations that no longer serve them, choosing instead to prioritize survival, autonomy, and financial resilience. And the spread of these behaviors has policymakers and creditors scrambling for solutions. Traditional tools of enforcement, legal action, wage garnishment, threats are proving ineffective on a mass scale. Debt collectors are especially struggling to adapt. In some cases, entire call centers are left with minimal engagement as borrowers ignore calls, block numbers, or vanish from traditional contact channels. Collection letters are increasingly ignored, and legal notices often go unaddressed. The system relies on fear and intimidation to enforce compliance, but when belief in consequences evaporates, control evaporates with it. The economic models that lenders and banks rely on assume consistent participation and repayment. Once participation falters, the entire model begins to destabilize. And with millions opting out, the potential for a systemic shift grows. Meanwhile, Americans are learning to leverage the system in ways previously unimagined. Ignoring certain debts strategically allows individuals to preserve essential resources while mitigating long-term risks. Healthcare bills, for example, are increasingly being managed selectively. Thanks to updated credit reporting rules, small unpaid medical debts may no longer impact credit scores, allowing patients to prioritize urgent medical needs and living expenses. Credit card companies, student loan servicers, and other lenders face growing challenges in enforcing repayment. And as this knowledge spreads, more households adopt similar strategies, amplifying the trend. What began as individual survival tactics is becoming a nationwide movement. In essence, the traditional financial system is being quietly undermined from within. Compliance, once guaranteed through fear, stigma, and social expectation is no longer a given. Americans are making deliberate choices to prioritize life over leisure. The shift is both strategic and rational. Paying every bill is no longer inherently responsible. It's often a luxury reserved for those with disposable income. For everyone else, selective non-payment is not just rational, it's necessary. And the scale of participation ensures that enforcement mechanisms can no longer function as intended. We are witnessing the birth of a new financial reality, one where obedience to debt is optional and survival, strategy, and autonomy reign supreme. By this point, a difficult truth becomes impossible to ignore. Banks are not passive institutions that simply hold your money. They are highly optimized machines designed to extract value from every dollar, every transaction, and every moment your money remains inside the system. And the most important part is this: they can only do it because the system was built to make their behavior feel normal. When you deposit money into a bank, it does not sit in a vault waiting for you. It immediately becomes part of a larger pool of capital that the bank uses to generate profit. Through fractional reserve banking, a single deposit can be lent out multiple times across the economy. Your money becomes someone else's loan, which earns interest, while you receive little to nothing in return. The bank captures the spread between what it pays you and what it charges borrowers. That spread, multiplied across millions of customers, is one of the most reliable profit engines in modern finance. But lending is only one layer. Banks also profit from time. The longer your money stays idle, the more opportunities they have to deploy it elsewhere. Meanwhile, inflation quietly erodes its purchasing power. Even when interest rates rise, banks adjust slowly on deposits and quickly on loans. This timing advantage ensures that they remain profitable in almost every economic environment. When rates are low, borrowing explodes. When rates rise, existing loans become more valuable. Either way, the system bends in their favor. Then there are fees. Overdraft fees, maintenance fees, foreign transaction fees, late payment fees, and penalty interest rates are not accidental. They are carefully structured revenue streams. For many banks, a significant portion of profits comes not from wealthy clients, but from customers living paycheck to paycheck. A single mistake, a delayed paycheck, or an unexpected expense can trigger a chain of fees that compound rapidly. This is not poor design, it is deliberate. Credit cards take this model even further. Banks know that most users will not pay their balance in full every month. They price products assuming long-term interest payments. Reward programs are marketed as benefits, but the cost is built into higher merchant fees and interest rates. The customer believes they are winning points, while the bank collects steady income over years. Convenience masks cost. Simplicity hides complexity. At a larger scale, banks also shape the economy by deciding who gets access to capital. Entire industries rise or fall based on lending priorities. Housing markets inflate when credit is cheap and freeze when it tightens. Small businesses struggle when risk models become restrictive. Individuals with assets gain leverage, while those without fall further behind. This is how inequality quietly compounds, not through a single policy, but through repeated financial advantage. What makes this system powerful is not secrecy, but familiarity. From childhood, people are taught that saving money in a bank is responsible behavior. Debt is normalized. Interest is accepted as unavoidable. Financial education, when it exists at all, focuses on budgeting, not systems. People are trained to manage symptoms, not understand causes. As long as individuals blame themselves for financial stress, the structure remains untouched. This does not mean banks are evil or illegal. They operate exactly as designed. The real issue is that most people participate without informed consent. They do not understand how their money is used, how risks are transferred, or how profits are generated. And because the system is complex, it discourages questioning. Complexity creates obedience, but awareness changes the relationship. When you understand how banks make money, you stop seeing financial products as favors and start seeing them as contracts. You ask different questions. Where is my money actually going? Who benefits from this structure? What alternatives exist? How can I reduce friction, fees, and unnecessary exposure? Some people respond by optimizing within the system. Others diversify into assets, businesses, or investments that generate real returns. Some demand transparency. Others build financial buffers that reduce dependence on debt. There is no single correct response, but there is one universal shift that matters: moving from passive participation to conscious choice. The biggest myth is that financial struggle is purely a personal failure. In reality, many people are playing a game whose rules were written long before they entered it. Banks understand the rules deeply. Most customers do not. That gap is where profit lives. The system will not collapse because people understand it. It will continue to function as long as trust remains. But trust without knowledge is fragile. The moment enough people begin to see money not as security, but as a tool, the balance subtly changes. Banks will continue to make money from your money. That will not stop. The only question is whether you understand how and whether you choose to remain unaware or become financially literate in a world that quietly profits from ignorance. This is not a call to reject banks. It is a call to see clearly, because once you understand the system, you stop fearing it. And when fear disappears, control begins.